House will come back to order. This House will come back to order. The clerk will ring the bell. Clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions. The clerk will read.
Recognizing and commending Anna Sarge Barr on the occasion of her retirement and her outstanding public service. Commending the Johnson High School Lady Adams Smasher basketball team for winning the 2018 GHSA Class 3A State Championship. Recognizing and commending Pastor Lawrence C. Knighton. Honoring the life and memory of Captain Glenn Tex Brewer. Honoring the life and memory of Mayor Herb Frady. Recognizing and commending Archbishop Ruth W. Smith Holmes for receiving the Astute Spiritual Foundation Community Pillar Award. Recognizing and commending Vivian A. Thomas for receiving the Community Pillar Award for Civic and Social Engagement. Recognizing and commending Marlene Lemons for receiving the Humanitarian Community Pillar Award. Recognizing and commending Chandra Lewis for receiving the Lady Justice, Justice for All Community Pillar Award. Commending the Schools Social Workers Association of Georgia and recognizing March 22nd, 2018 as Schools Social Workers Association of Georgia Day at the State Capitol. Recognizing and commending Jerry Van Dykes. Recognizing and commending John W. Geary. Recognizing and commending the City of Roswell's craft beer breweries. Recognizing and commending Marshall Washington George. Commending the Jonesboro High School mock trial team for winning its ninth state championship. Recognizing March 22nd, 2018 as Georgia Speech Language Hearing Association Day at the State Capitol. Recognizing and commending Danaska, Georgia Partners LP. Recognizing the United States House of Representatives for its passage of House Resolution 620 and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privileged resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privileged resolutions? The chair hears none and the resolutions are adopted. We are now going on to the rules calendar. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 301.
Senate Bill 301 by Senator Kennedy, the 18th, be titled an act to amend Title 53 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to wills, trusts, and administration of estates, so as to enact the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Representative Fleming to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Senate Bill 301, the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. Simply what this bill does is recognize that we need to make some adjustments to current Georgia law, given the fact that so many of our citizens in this state do things like online banking, they have online social media, and it used to be when you, for example, had to deal with a loved one who passed away and you had to be the executor of their estate, you went and got your appropriate letters from the probate court, then you went down to the bank, or you went to wherever else they had an account and you dealt with the property that they had. Now, so often, that property is actually online. This is a model bill brought to us by the State Bar, which has been adopted by 40 other states, including all the states that surround Georgia, which make it easier for those fiduciaries, those people with now the responsibility to care for somebody else's property, to do that in an online situation. Mr. Speaker, that's basically what the bill does. I would be happy to try to answer any questions that anyone may have.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd appreciate your favorable passage of Senate Bill 301.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 301 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 301, the ayes are 162, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 377.
Senate Bill 377 by Senator Strickland of the 17th, Miller of the 40th, Martin of the 9th, Jones of the 25th, and Huffstetler of the 52nd. Be titled an act to repeal Article 8 of Chapter 7 of Title 50 Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the State Workforce Development Board, and to amend Title 34 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to labor and industrial relations. This bill is referred to the Committee on Industry and Labor. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Representative Rhodes to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I rise this afternoon to bring before you Senate Bill 377. All this bill does is move the Governor's Office of Workforce Development from the Department of Economic Development to the Technical College System of Georgia. The 2019 budget from the Governor's Office reflects this move, so that is being taken care of, and all we're doing is connecting those that are working to pair our state's workers with employees that are coming to the #1 state in which to do business with the system that is directly training our citizens for the jobs of the 21st century. If there are any questions, Mr. Speaker, I'll try to answer them.
You do have a question, do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Chairman Watson to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
What will be the ripple effect of this move for workers across the state of Georgia?
Well, we're hoping that it's going to be a huge giant ripple in creating a new workforce for our state, but what I really think this is doing is letting our state take the tools that are at our disposal and using our organic filaments and weaving a great blanket of employment for our state.
It's a good bill. Thank you.
I yield the will.
Chair has a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Will this board have a motto?
I'm sure we can come up with one.
You don't have one?
But yes, sir, I do. It's not for ourselves, but for others.
Gentleman has yielded the well.
Yes, sir.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 377 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 377, the ayes are 164. The nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 444.
Senate Bill 444 by Senator Unerman of the 45th, Hofstetler of the 52nd, Watson the 1st, Burke of the 11th, Kirkpatrick of the 32nd, and others. Be titled an act to amend Chapter 6 and Title 49, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to services for the aging, so as to create the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementias State Plan Advisory Council. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Human Relations and Aging. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Chairman Eddie Lumsden to present the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I bring to you Senate Bill 444. This is a bill that deals with the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementia State Plan Advisory Council. This council was created several years ago and plays a vital role in providing priorities and plans related to the state's delivery of dementia and Alzheimer's services. During code revision, the language establishing and defining the scope of responsibilities for this council was inadvertently removed from code. All Senate Bill 444 does is to replace the code that authorizes the existence and the function of this particular council.
You have no questions.
Thank you. I yield the will and ask for your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 444 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of Senate Bill 444. The ayes are 160. The nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Resolution 821.
Senate Resolution 821 by Senator Martin of the 9th, Jackson the 2nd, Watson the 1st, Jones the 22nd, and Dugan the 30th. A resolution recognizing Augusta as an official cybersecurity and information technology innovation corridor. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Economic Development and Tourism. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Chairman Ron Stevens to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I present you today SR 821. It'll establish the Fort Gordon Security Innovation Corridor in Augusta and the Logistics Technology Innovation Corridor in Savannah. During the off session, the Senate had a study committee and they met and determined these two communities would benefit from this designation. As you might know, Fort Gordon has already got the federal designation, and this of course will expand that to the private and public sector. But Mr. Speaker, if there's no questions, I'd ask you for favorable consideration, and I'll yield the well.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir. I yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Newton, to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Will this work with the current federal designation at Fort Gordon and Augusta with cyber expansion there?
It will. It brings a spotlight to that area, and it'll also allow for expansion to other areas in that area. It's a good question. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I fully support it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield the well.
No further questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of Senate Resolution 821 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of Senate Resolution 821, the ayes are 167, the nays are 1. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1414.
House Resolution 1414 by Representative Jaspers to the 11th and others, a resolution creating the House Study Committee on School Security. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Special Rules. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Chairman Jaspers to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I bring before you House Resolution 1414. This is an important issue. You know, we've worked very hard on school security here in the last few years in many different ways. And this resolution you're going to vote on today will create the House Study Committee on School Security. The committee is going to look forward to really digging deep in the issues that surround this subject. You know, there's a lot of passion out there for this right now, but we'll be looking for facts. We'll be looking for recommendations for possible legislation or even not. But Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for your leadership on this issue in the creation of this study committee. Speaker, I stand for any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 1414, the ayes are 169, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. We have a supplemental calendar, and the chair calls House Resolution 1137 from the supplemental calendar. The clerk will read.
House Resolution 1137 by Representative Deffenbaugh, the first and others, a resolution urging the United States Congress and President of the United States to support the members of the armed forces by using the last portion of service before discharge to support and repair the mental and physical health of our servicemen and women. This bill having referred to the Committee on Special Rules, that committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Representative Deffenbaugh to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, or the House membership here. My resolution is towards the President and towards the Congress and the U.S. Congress to take the time that they spent in developing a soldier to carry out all the horrendous things that they have to do, and then at the end of the time to take and try to repair some of those things so they can go back into society. They don't have to go to jail. They don't have to lose their lives through in any other means. They don't have to lose their jobs. They're not in special courts. So, we ought to be able to take some time before we release them, even if we have to release them to the veterans, to take some of the major problems and get it resolved so that they can become part of society again. And that's basically all that I wish to be done. This is something that the military is supposed to do, and if the military finds a person incapable of going out into society, they even have the right to hold them longer than their enlistment. But I'm not advocating that as much as just they take 6 months to train the soldier, take 6 months to help him get back to society. And that's all that I have.
And you have no questions?
Well, then I will leave the well. Thank you very much.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 1137, the ayes are 164, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1470.
House Resolution 1470 by Representative Gravely of the 67th and others, a resolution recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and urging the President of the United States to relocate the United States Embassy to Israel's capital. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Special Rules. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Representative Gravely to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, today I bring to you House Resolution 1470, which would urge the United States government, the President, to continue in its initiative to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, move our embassy. Let me say that in 1995, Congress passed an act known as the Jerusalem Embassy Act. It was signed into law by then President Bill Clinton. In 1997, I had the incredible opportunity as a college senior here in this state to go and study in Jerusalem. It was a magnificent experience, and it was one that touched my life and changed my life forever. When President George W. Bush was elected, he said, and I quote, "Something will happen when I am president. As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the U.S. ambassador to the city Israel has chosen as its capital." It wasn't long before then candidate Senator Barack Obama then said that the state of Israel's security is uncompromised. Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided. Ladies and gentlemen, this resolution simply urges Congress to continue with the initiative that has happened the previous three administrations, 2 Democrat, 1 Republican, in moving our embassy to the capital that Israel, not only today, but for the last 40, 50, 60 years, since 1948, has recognized as their capital city. Their parliament, the Knesset, operates today in West Jerusalem. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge this body to support what the current administration and the previous 3 administrations have worked toward, have said they support, and that we as Georgia commend them for doing so and would stand with Israel and adopt House Resolution 1470.
You have a question if you care to yield.
I will yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Vernon Jones to your left for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will, yes.
Isn't it true that it's been a bipartisan effort by several administrations in a bipartisan fashion to move the capital to, or the embassy to Jerusalem?
The gentleman knows of which he speaks. That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Speaker.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge this body to support House Resolution 1470.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of House Resolution 1470 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of House Resolution 1470, the ayes are 117, the nays are 43. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1469.
House Resolution 1469 by Representative Gravely, the 67th and others, a resolution urging the government of Israel to maintain its Consulate General in Atlanta, Georgia. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Special Rules. That committee recommends this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Representative Gravely to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, today I want to let us know that across the United States we have 9 consulate generals that represent the state of Israel. Those cities are Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., New York, San Francisco, Miami, Houston, Chicago, Boston, and Atlanta. We're very, very privileged to have our own consulate general for the state of Israel here in Atlanta. Atlanta represents the entire Southeast. However, a few years ago, the consul general was shut down in Philadelphia. Rumors then spread that Atlanta would be on the list, and I immediately got to work the moment I discovered that that was a possibility. And let me tell you why. Friends, Atlanta is the bedrock home of the civil rights movement. On April 18th in this city, we will celebrate the 70th anniversary of our Israeli consulate here in Atlanta. This body also supported the Holocaust Memorial. Friends, not only because we recognize the contributions of the Jewish community here in our state, we embrace the culture, but we also greatly appreciate the economic impact that over 15,000 Israeli American businessmen and women contribute to our city and our great state. One other point that should be mentioned is the fact that when consul generals are appointed, sometimes they are just that, they're appointed. They are individuals that come and represent their nation. But we, however, have the distinct honor of having not only a consul general, but with Judith Varney Shore, we have one of the only appointed consul generals that is an ambassador. It is a very distinct honor that we have in our city. I would urge this body to let the state of Israel know that we not only embrace the consul general, we support the consul general, and we support this community. I would ask for your favorable consideration on House Resolution 1469.
Do you yield for questions?
I do yield for questions.
Chair recognizes Chairman Tom Taylor to your right for a question.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker. Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that we have 79 foreign consulates or honorary consulates in Atlanta? And being a business center, that this is important to us, remaining in the international business community and #1 state to do business in?
That is absolutely true. I thank the gentleman for the statement.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask for your favorable consideration on House Resolution 1469.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 1469, the ayes are 173, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Senate Bill 328 was postponed last Thursday, March 15th, until the next legislative day, and is called at this time. The clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 328.
Senate Bill 328 by Senator Albers of the 56th, Huffstetler of the 52nd, Cowser of the 46th, Hill of the 4th, Watson the 1st, and others. Be titled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to the imposition rate computation and exemptions from state income tax. This bill having referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. The committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Harrell to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Section 1 of this bill is a House Ways and Means Committee amendment. It makes a technical correction to the Internal Revenue Code update that we previously passed this session. As you know, there were numerous changes to the federal tax laws this year, and this particular provision was included in the original update. And if we allow it to stand, for the first time in Georgia history, we would be taxing the income of a foreign subsidiary of a Georgia corporation. We've never done that in the history of our state, so Section 1 simply makes that technical adjustment to the Internal Revenue Code update and strikes that provision, so we will not attempt to tax the foreign earned income of a foreign subsidiary of a Georgia-based corporation. Section 2, 3, and 4 of this bill are a result of a Senate study committee this past off session that looked at various tax exemptions, and this bill would repeal 3 rarely used tax exemptions. Section 2 repeals a $25 per employee fringe benefit on transportation. Only a very few have claimed that over the last 4 years, amounting to roughly $30,000 a year for all companies in the state of Georgia. Not very well used. Section 3 repeals a $150 credit for a private driver's education course. Again, last year, over 30,000 new licenses were issued. Only 872 individuals claimed the credit, rarely used. And in Section 4, it repeals a tax credit for diesel particulates that have not a single penny has been claimed of that particular credit over the last 3 years. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and I would be glad to stand for questions.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir, I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Henson to your left for a question.
Thank you. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am, I will.
With regard to the private driver ed, is the tax credit for the school that is conducting it, or is it for the individual that's taking the course?
The individual would claim that tax credit at the end of the year when they filed their personal individual income tax returns. Yes, ma'am. The individual.
Further question?
Yes, ma'am.
I was not aware that this credit was out there, but then I don't have children taking driver's ed. But I really wonder if it was used so infrequently because people were not aware of it.
Well, certainly that could be the case. Quite frankly, a few years ago when we passed the super speeder law and Joshua's law and mandated driver's education, and then the insurance companies began giving a 10% reduction on insurance premiums for families that have young drivers that have been in the course, that incentive has been what has been more attractive and more widely used, which probably is one of the reasons this particular credit is rarely used. Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable passage.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 328 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of Senate Bill 328. The ayes are 139, the nays are 36. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1292.
House Resolution 1292 by Representative Cooper, the 43rd, and others. A resolution urging the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementia Advisory Council and its work groups to study providing access to quality long-term care for individuals with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I bring you House Resolution 1295. We just passed Senate Bill 444, which reestablishes the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementia Advisory Council. And this is an urging resolution asking them to first and foremost study any rules, regulations, and special needs that our state has for dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia. These patients, the illness is very long. It's a slow progress, but very debilitating. Over 61% of our nursing home beds are filled with patients with either Alzheimer's or other dementia-related illnesses. They have special needs. It's much more demanding than some of the average patients. And we, as an aging state, need to look and see how we can facilitate even better care and more available care for people with this illness. We are living to be over 85, and if people who live to be over 85, 1 out of 2 will have Alzheimer's or a dementia-related cognitive problem. So I would ask that you vote favorably for this bill, and Mr. Speaker, I will relinquish the well. Thank you.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir, I will yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Rogers to your right for a question.
Will the lady yield?
I will yield.
Is it not true that Alzheimer's and dementia both are horrible diseases that impact every demographic and family in the state of Georgia?
They're a terrible disease, and many families try to take care of their loved ones, but as the disease progresses, it is beyond a family's ability to take care of them and protect them and give them the best care, and they seek to find a facility that where those patients can live in comfort and security and get the best care. Yes, it is.
As someone who's had to deal with that with a family member, is it not also true that many of these families have a hard time making that transition, that anything that we can do to ease the burden of regulation would be beneficial?
Yes, many families have trouble finding a nursing home that will take care of them because of the fact that in many ways they're very demanding patients, not from the patient itself, but just what it takes to take care of them. And so there is a limit on how many the nursing homes will take, and it is a struggle to find a good place for your loved one to get the best of the care if they are suffering from Alzheimer's or one of the other dementia problems.
Thank you so much for bringing this resolution.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? On the adoption of House Resolution 1292, I'm sorry, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 1292, the ayes are 170, the nays are 1. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 944.
House Resolution 944 by Representative Hill III, a resolution expressing concern regarding organ harvesting in the People's Republic of China. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Interstate Cooperation. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Representative Dwayne Hill to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, committee members. I would appreciate your favorable consideration in House Resolution 944, which urges the people of the Republic of China to end the practice of forced harvesting of organs from prisoners, especially of the Falun Gong and other prisoners of conscience. This has been going on for some time and should be stopped. Our Congress has passed a resolution in regards to this, and so has several other states. And I would appreciate your favorable consideration.
You have a question if you care to yield.
I yield, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Jeff Jones to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I yield.
Is it not true, Representative, that you and I have spoken on this topic a number of occasions? And is it not further true that I am in 100% agreement with your resolution that this is a practice that we would like to see stopped, but that your resolution is just one that is going to urge the government of China to cease its practice of organ harvesting?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for bringing this resolution.
Thank you, sir.
No further questions.
I yield the will.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of House Resolution 944 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of House Resolution 944, the ayes are 156, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. I sort of feel like that the member in the well and I are interrupting your conversations, and I don't want to get in your way of having a good discussion, but the noise level is getting a little high in here, and we're taking up legislation. Chair recognizes Chairman Knight. I'm sorry, clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 458?
Senate Bill 458 by Senator Wilkinson, the 50th, Gooch, the 51st, Ginn of the 47th, Brass, the 28th, and Mullis, the 53rd. To be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating the general provisions regarding ad valorem taxation of property, so as to provide the conditions upon which family-owned farmed entities may elect to discontinue a qualifying use of bona fide conservation use property. This bill having referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Now, Chair recognizes Chairman Knight to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 458, the part of the bill that came over was dealing with a CUVA issue in which, again, the interpretation across the state from the different tax assessors are in limbo. So it's making it very clear in the case where there's a family farm entity and one of the persons within that entity is 65 years or older, that they can get out of that CUVA at the reduced penalty like there are in the other sections of the code. Again, we're seeing where the interpretation of state code is being carried out differently in different counties across the state. The other part of the bill, which is actually House Bill 373, which was my bill that passed through this body unanimously, it is also on the first part of this bill. We have attached that part to it. So I'll ask for your favorable consideration, and I'll stand for any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. There is a Rules Committee substitute. It is Rules Sub LC 372654 ERS. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? Is there objection? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 458 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 458, the ayes are 172, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 331.
Senate Bill 331 by Senator Henson, the 41st, Kirk of the 13th, Mullis the 53rd, Orrock of the 36th, Butler of the 55th, and others, be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 27 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating the general provisions regarding the Georgia Lottery for Education Act, so as to allow a winner of a lottery prize to remain anonymous. This bill having referred to the Committee on Higher Education, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 331 does one thing and one thing only. It basically says that if you win $250,000 in the Georgia lottery, that you can keep those winnings anonymous if you present in writing to the lottery board. Why is that important? I can bet you the family in Fitzgerald, Georgia, with Gregory Birch, who was killed in his home after winning $400,000 by a masked man that came up and shot through the door. The police later determined that he was targeted for his lottery winnings. How about in Lakeland? Abraham Shakespeare was murdered by a woman who befriended him after he won $30 million on a Florida lottery. She convinced him to transfer the assets into her name and was later convicted of murder once the money was transferred. Tampa, Florida, Jeffrey Dampier, the winner of $20 million lottery prize, he was kidnapped, robbed, murdered by individuals who knew that he had the lottery winnings. And they go on and on. Personal finance writer Sienna Koosman researched the pitfalls of public lottery disclosures. If the winnings are public knowledge, she writes, you can bet your phone will never stop ringing. Winners will hear from investors, reputable firms, and scammers, and every planning schemer under the sun. They also need to be wary of the people who purposely slip and fall on your property, including scams, rear-ending you in a car, that's happened, and it's including contractors, babysitters, friends and families who visit to borrow your car. Ladies and gentlemen, I can go on and on with the scenarios, but all this does is in writing, if you say that you want to be anonymous when you win these winnings, that you can stay anonymous and protect your family. Mr. Speaker, I'll accept any questions if there are any. If not, I'll ask for your favorable consideration, and let's save these Georgians' lives.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir, I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Al Williams to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
Is it not true that I was kind of in the middle on this, but after listening to you, you scared me into submission? Thank you for the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 331 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 331, the ayes are 173. The nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1471.
House Resolution 1471 by Representative Stovall, a 74th and others, a resolution creating the House Study Committee on the Revitalization of the Atlanta State Farmers Market. This resolution having been referred to the Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, that committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Chair recognizes Representative Stovall to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. and members of the House, I bring before you House Resolution 1471, which would create a study committee on the revitalization of the Atlanta State Farmers Market. I want to first off thank Chairman McCall and the Agriculture Committee members, the Speaker's Office, and Agriculture Commissioner Black, and others who worked on this bill. The Atlanta State Farmers Market was acquired in 1956 with about 150 acres located in Clayton County in the city of Forest Park. It's the largest and most comprehensive of the 9 markets located across the state. The Georgia Department of Agriculture, through the Commissioner of Agriculture, is authorized by the General Assembly to establish and make necessary rules and regulations to properly conduct such markets. The Department of Agriculture operates the 9 farmers markets across the state to promote handling, packaging, transporting, storage, distribution, inspection, and sale of agricultural products. Why is a study committee needed? To determine the viability and create recommendations to ensure the longevity in a changing agriculture industry. My office for the past 1.5 years have been working in meeting with our local government officials, businesses, Commissioner Black's office, Atlanta Produce Dealers Association, Georgia Department of Economic Development and Tourism, and many others on getting the ball rolling on revitalization of the Atlanta State Farmers Market. It is a huge stapler in the areas I represent, but in the opinion of many has been underutilized. It is the last thing a person sees leaving Clayton County and the first thing a person sees when entering into Clayton County. Because it is state-run, then the state should take the lead on it. Every entity and community person I have spoken with wants to know, when will it happen? When will the revitalization happen? Clayton State University's MBA class in November compiled a SWOT analysis marketing plan for it. There was a recent audit that was conducted in January of 2018 by the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts Performance Audit Division on all 9 markets in the state. A performance audit had not been conducted since 1988. In 2016, the fiscal year markets generated $6.9 million in revenue from the leases, gate tickets, truck scale sales, fees, and expended approximately $4 million in expenses. Of those amount, 84% came from the Atlanta State Farmers Market. The fees collected to pay necessary costs of operating and maintaining. There is right now a lack of political support for closing some of the markets or investing in the marketplace, repairing posing of others. The appropriations that we recently did in 2015 and 16 totaled about $14 million to implement the first phase of the plan commissioned by GDA in 2011's completed study. Along with the distribution areas, we think that identifying potential tourism opportunities for local residents nationally, internationally, like an agritourism stop, encouraging urban agriculture education in Metro Atlanta, and preserving the history of agriculture and the Atlanta State Farmers Market, or perhaps a museum site. We know that a public-private partnership is a must in order to make these suggestions possible. So I ask for your favorable consideration and vote so that we can make Atlanta State Farmers Market more than the top distribution center in Southeast, but the largest agricultural destination as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll yield for any questions.
You have questions if you care to yield.
Yes, I will.
Chair recognizes Representative Bentley to your left for a question.
Does the gentlelady yield?
Yes, I do.
Is it not true that this House resolution came through the Agriculture Committee and all members present that early morning voted in favor of your resolution?
Yes, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for your work on the State Farmers Market.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
Yes, I do.
Chair recognizes Representative Laricki to your right.
Does the gentlelady yield?
Yes.
Is it not true that I very much appreciate you coming down to South Georgia on the agriculture tour and appreciate your hard work for the farmers market and how important agriculture is to the state of Georgia.
Thank you. I appreciate your support.
You have no further questions.
Thank you. I yield the will.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the adoption of House Resolution 1471. The ayes are 164, the nays are 4. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 336.
Senate Bill 336 by Senator Unnerman of the 45th, Miller of the 49th, Butler of the 55th, McCoon of the 29th. Be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 35 of the Fish Code of Georgia, annotated, relating the general provisions relevant to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, so as to provide that when a subpoena is issued for production of electronic communication service records for computer or electronic devices that are used in furtherance of certain offenses against minors, such provider of electronic communication service or other computer services shall not provide notice of such subpoena to the subscriber or caller. This bill then referred to the Committee on Judiciary Non-Civil. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Welch to present the bill.
Good afternoon. Before you is Senate Bill 336. This was brought over by the Senate. Renee Unterman's bill. I put a summary on your desk about the bill. First part of this bill, the summary and first part, deals with administrative subpoenas. Under current law, an administrative subpoena can be issued by the director of the GBI. Has to be done with the consent and approval of the AG's office. And those subpoenas go to determine the IP address for computers that are used in the propagation of images and trafficking of children, the images of minors. And it's only limited to those things: human trafficking, the trafficking of minors, whether it's for labor or for sex. It's also in any images that distort or nude images of children, or place them in a light that would be detrimental to them as individuals. But that's the first part of the bill, and that deals with administrative subpoenas. The problem that is existing now, that the bill addresses with this regard, is that the internet providers such as Google or Facebook, if an image is posted on Facebook of a child being exploited, then that image needs to be tracked back to an IP address. The administrative subpoena allows for them to track that information back to the IP address to determine whether or not that computer is even in the state of Georgia. From there, a warrant would then be issued. If it is determined that it's within the state of Georgia, the warrant would be issued to actually obtain the computer and the information on that computer. This subpoena does not allow for that, obtaining that information, and that is not how GPI uses that information. Most of their information that they learn about is actually through cyber tips. So tips come in through Facebook or through Google or through other internet providers, they actually submit this information. If they've got a tip internally, they see something on Facebook or that's posted on the internet, they'll actually report that into a national child exploitation database. And then that tip is then relayed to the GBI. The GBI then will look for the subpoena, the administrative subpoena, to determine if that computer is located in the state of Georgia, and then take the necessary protocols. The subpoena can be challenged in court, and so the provider can actually challenge that subpoena in court before it's executed. That's the nature of the first part of the bill. The second part of the bill deals with the wrap back bill that I brought before you at crossover day. That bill has been pared down significantly, gone back through committee, subcommittee, and full committee. And that bill, again, allows for GBI to retain fingerprints, and those fingerprints can be retained by GBI for the purposes of ongoing real-time criminal background checks for only 4 agencies, the employees and licensees, for 4 agencies. The Department of Early Child Care Learning, Department of Human Services, specifically with DFACS, the Department of Human Health, and the Department of Behavioral Health and Disabilities. So those 4 are the 4 agencies that are covered by the bill that you have before you. All the other entities and fingerprinting entities were taken out of the bill in full committee. So all that is removed. So we've narrowed the focus, and I've given you a summary of that on your desk. If we think that it's important as a policy, if we think that it's important to take the fingerprint and check the criminal background of any individual that might work in a daycare facility, or that might also be a child care provider, might be a foster parent, might also work in a child caring institution, if we think that's important, the time we issue that license or gain that employment, then it should also be important that we know that as they're providing that care, once they've been licensed, once they've been placed in that role of supervision. And this bill would allow us to, if the agency wants to subscribe with GBI, then that would be monitored on a real-time basis. And if there's a hit in NCIC or GCIC, the employer or the agency would be notified. Those are the natures, that's the summary of the bill, and it's a lengthy summary because I wanted to make sure I went through it thoroughly with you. Mr. Speaker, I'll take questions at this time.
You do not appear to have any questions. Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to speak to the bill.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise in support of SB 336. As a skeptic on issues of privacy, the subject matter here gives me concern, as many members of this body. But I'm speaking today to assuage the concerns of members who might have voted against this on the floor before, but need to recognize this is a very solid and appropriate and balanced bill. As Chairman Welch said, if you believe, and there's a variety of beliefs on this question, but if you happen to believe that when the federal government takes a fingerprint at the FBI level, that somehow stays in a federal government database and never comes back, this bill does nothing to affect that whatsoever. What this bill does is if somebody is up for an important position for which state law mandates a fingerprint to be collected, currently that fingerprint goes up before they take the position, and that's the last we really do with it. What this bill simply says is it's going to go up and it's going to be maintained over time. So while people are in those positions of responsibility, such as foster parents, this bill creates a circumstance where not before someone becomes foster parents, but during their whole time as a foster parent, those fingerprints are maintained so that we can have real-time enforcement if they should break the law in some other state. It's simply common sense, ladies and gentlemen. This changes nothing about what information goes to the federal government. Because today, fingerprints go forward for an NCIC check, and under this bill, it goes forward for an NCIC check. If you believe the federal government maintains information forever that they receive, this bill doesn't change that at all. because the fingerprints of Georgians in those key positions goes up one time under this bill, just like it goes up one time today. So if you have concerns about empowering the federal government or federal hanging on to information such as biometrics and fingerprints, this bill doesn't change that one single bit. Nothing you're going to hear today from any opponent of this bill changes the fact this does nothing to change that. This simply recognizes that for jobs that are so important that we would collect a fingerprint for, we won't just investigate the person before they take the job, but we will have real-time monitoring the whole time they're in that job, that in case they break the law nationwide, we have the ability to bring an action immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, as a real skeptic on privacy issues, I would submit to you that SB 336, although there was some confusion earlier when this came before us on crossover day, is not a confusing bill at all. And if you have any concerns on it, I would strongly support that you understand that this changes nothing about information the federal government has on our citizens. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd be glad to yield to questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader of the House, Leader Trammell, to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to leave the privacy debate to others, but I want to focus this on another part of the bill. And I want to start at looking at lines 72 and 73. It's been said that the bill has been pared down to apply only to certain agencies, and the bill has been pared down from the form that we looked at on crossover day. But if you look at what subsection F does, where it starts in line 72, it says that allows the GBI to retain fingerprints for any individuals for whom a fingerprint-based criminal history check is authorized under our law or federal law. So just because there are only a couple of agencies in the bill doesn't mean that that somehow limits the scope of which fingerprints are going to be retained. But that's not why I'm here speaking on this bill. Why I'm here starts at line 78 and goes through 80. And it's the last part of 78, and provided, the qualifier, it's what we're carving out. Provided further that the center shall not file or retain fingerprints submitted for the purpose of obtaining or renewing a weapons carry license, as such term is defined in Code Section 1611-125.1. Now, as I understand the argument for real-time monitoring, the argument is that we want the ability for these agencies to know immediately when someone has been convicted of another crime, because they pose a threat in different contexts. If they're working with children, we do not want criminals and felons to be working with children. So if they commit a crime in Alabama or California or New York, we want to know that in Georgia to protect our kids. The same thing with people who are working for the elderly. So the question for this House, what is different about a Georgia weapons carry license? Now, I started to put this on our desk, and I wanted to save, we get inundated with paper at this time in the session, so I didn't do it. But I went to 1611-129, and that's the statute that lays out what you have to do to get a Georgia weapons carry license. And you know what? As a legislature and a state, we have already made the policy determination that in order to obtain one, you have to be subject to a fingerprint criminal background check in order to get a weapons carry license. And the reason that we do that makes sense, right? We don't want criminals carrying concealed weapons. And when you look at the exceptions about who can't get a weapons carry license, and you go through, it ticks off different felonies and different misdemeanors. So if you've been convicted of those, you can't get them. That's the policy determination of this body. That is state law, because that protects our citizenry. If somebody's done that, we have made a judgment that they should not be carrying a concealed weapon. And in some cases, in the case of felons, they've lost their constitutional right to carry, period. So the policy question that I'm looking at when I'm looking at lines 78 through 80 is, why don't we want real-time determination about weapons carry license? If somebody had committed a felony in California or New York or Alabama or South Carolina that would subject them to revocation if the probate court judge in their county knew about that, why wouldn't we want to know that in real time? It's a public safety issue. Because just like protecting those kids, if someone had gone on a crime spree in another state, the way we've set this up, we have exempted ourselves from the determination, something that we have the ability to do, as previous speakers have said. Why? Why is it different? So my ask to this House is, let's treat them the same, or if we have concern about the implications that the fingerprints would have for people who apply for weapons carry permits, why wouldn't we have the same consideration and concerns for those in the context that are in this bill? That's the fundamental policy consideration that is before this body. We've specifically carved it out, and it doesn't make sense. The summary that the gentleman from the 110th left on the desk, I mean, it asks a very salient question about halfway down. If we believe it is important to know the criminal history when we place a person in position of authority over our children and elderly, then shouldn't those regulatory agencies have the authority to receive real-time updates to that person's criminal background? I'm asking this House the same question about weapons carry permits. Mr. Speaker, I yield it well.
That's all the members that had signed up to speak. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. There is a minority report on the bill. There is a minority report. The chair recognizes Representative Gonzalez to speak to the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today to present the minority report in opposition of Senate Bill 336 based on three core reasons. The first being that secret subpoenas have been declared unconstitutional by courts all over the U.S., including in lawsuits won by Facebook as well as Google, who is considering opening a branch right here in Georgia. Two, this bill would make the Georgia legislature responsible for granting the authority to a state agency to give high-risk biometric data of innocent Georgians to a federal agency, knowingly disregarding security concerns and best practices, considering the testimony that has been given in committee. And three, this is not a partisan issue. The defeat was bipartisan on crossover because we all want to protect our constituents. The broadness of this bill sets up a dangerous policy of disregard for Georgians' privacy and identity in our online world. I will only address the first part of this bill briefly because I believe that will actually be addressed in the courts. Secret subpoenas have been declared unconstitutional, and a reason why they have gone from a high use in 2004 of over 54,000 a year to a low use in 2017 of less than 12,000. Mainly because of lawsuits brought by Facebook and Google. And considering our pride in Georgia being named the #1 state to do business, it behooves us to consider whether we as a legislature should continue to put in laws in place that question how welcoming to business we truly are. Now to the second part of the bill and my main concerns. Most people think of this bill and believe we are merely talking about fingerprints, the lowly fingerprint. A fingerprint in the meaning of an image that captures not just something we carry with us to ID ourselves, but something that is actually a part of us, that IDs us without us showing it or not. And so many believe that my opposition is based on just the fingerprint. However, my opposition goes further to a policy question for us as a legislature. Last night I was watching The Theory of Everything, a biographical film about Stephen Hawking, the esteemed physicist who has died recently. During the film, Einstein was mentioned, and so I ask you for a minute of your indulgence and let us do a thought experiment. Let's imagine for a minute that being a state representative or a state senator is a state job, and that in order to assume our seat, we have to be fingerprinted and consent to a background check. After all, we do not want criminals serving in our government. Think of the scandal that would be. And so let's say again, just imagining that we have a system in place that we all get fingerprinted every time we get elected before we take our seats. And let's also say that then somebody comes and says, hey, you know, that takes up so much of your time. Here's a system where all you have to do is be fingerprinted once and you will never have to do it again for as long as you are reelected. So let's say that that time that we save, since everything is adjusted for us, like when we can qualify right here in the Capitol, at the most we might be saving 15 to 20 minutes every 2 years. Just imagine what we can do with those extra 15 to 20 minutes every 2 years. Then they come back and they say, you know, this system that was created, it was actually not created by us, by a federal agency. And if you want to use it to save that time, you actually have to agree that we're going to give them that fingerprint and they can do whatever they want with it. Put it another way, if I was to tell you right now that outside this chamber there was a machine ready to collect your fingerprints for this system, would you at this moment get up from your seat and hand it right over? That is an interesting idea to consider, that every bill that we pass is one that would apply to our particular situation and ourselves. In my committee meetings, there has been a lot of discussion over liability and the word knowingly. For example, Representative Donahue can attest to those discussions on his social hosting bill, a bill that I hope he'll bring back so that we can figure out the answer to that question. The concept of knowingly is sprinkled throughout Georgia code as the standard to apply a liability and hold someone accountable and responsible for some bad action. So let's consider this question as one of policy. For one committee member stated that this should not be a concern at all because the FBI is doing whatever they want to do now. And we don't know what that is. So why should it matter? But this does not change my argument that makes the concern even greater. Because whatever the FBI has been doing up to now, including what it does today, it does so without us knowingly consenting for them to do it, without us knowingly giving the authority for them to do so. But should we pass this bill, then each yes given is a vote knowingly authorizing an entity to do potentially bad action with our consent, with us knowingly authorizing this, knowingly not knowing what they're going to do with the actual fingerprint they collect. This is not about an image. This is about a policy, and at the end of this vote, we will either be liable for knowingly giving authority to an entity for potential bad action, or we will knowingly protect Georgians and say we need to know what's happening within the software first. I've spoken with representatives of the GBI yesterday on a Sunday evening and this morning, and they still could not give me an answer that addresses this policy concern. For weeks, I had been told that the system was separate from the criminal system. This morning, it was verified by a GBI tech that it is not. It is one system where all the data is put together, separated only into tables to create subsets. That this system works as one huge database is something that we were told is not true. And in fact, the bill that you have before you specifies it must be kept as two separate systems. In order to do that right now, we would need to appropriate and assign money to create the second system, which does not exist. I've also heard from members of the agencies that this bill still applies to, now only 4 from 19, to vote for it because it would make things easier for them. This bill limits the pool to who it applies to, but the substitute does not in any way change the essence of what this bill does. And I appreciate the bill's author trying to limit that pool. But the truth is, are we to accept now an argument that to sacrifice security simply for convenience? Is it not true that what is in the best interest of the public may not necessarily mean what is most convenient for some? Because sometimes a little inconvenience makes the system and the process better, because it serves as a check against an unrelenting scope of responsibility and accountability. For example, we have a system in place via committees to help us perfect the language of bills so they are not overbroad or unconstitutional or that create more problems than what they set out to resolve, or even sometimes to discover that there was nothing to solve in the first place. I have appreciated learning that system and being part of that system and seeing that system work through. And I think we can all agree that sometimes these committees and the time spent in them are not always convenient. But does that mean we should stop them? So coming back to the fingerprint, and you see the image on the screen, if the answer to the question is that fingerprints and not fingerprint minutia are how the FBI system works, then we need to acknowledge that it is a policy decision by the FBI to have their software work this way instead of the usual way that's considered a best practice in security circles, and that now we in the Georgia legislature have to make a policy decision as to whether we will knowingly authorize the GBI to collect and store and give this data knowingly to the FBI without sufficient security measures in place. Shouldn't we, as elected officials, when we swear the oath to protect life, liberty, and property of all Georgians, not also have the right to hold up these organizations to recognize security standards when they are asking for this highly sensitive, high-risk data of our constituents? So I present the premise that in this case, a fingerprint, a lowly, blurred image, is not just a fingerprint at all, but a reflection and an indication to our consent to liability against the best interest of our constituents. Thank you, and I yield the well with no questions.
You do have questions if you care to yield.
I do not yield. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the chairman of the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee for the chair's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield the chairman's time to Chairman Welch.
Gentleman has that right. Chair recognizes Chairman Welch for the balance of the chair's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just, one quick point. Whenever I go to court and I present to a judge or a jury legal issues, there's one thing that I have to do. I have to cite the case law. To get up in front of a judge, and frankly, to get up to many of the lawyers that are in this room and my colleagues in this room who, frankly, know a lot more law than some of the lawyers I have to go against, and not cite the case law tells me that the person does not know which they speak. And so I'm going to give you case law that tells you that when you go and post information on the internet, Facebook and Google, you have waived your right to privacy. You do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy. I'll ask you to look at Smith versus Maryland, 442 U.S. 735, 1979. I'll ask you to look at United States versus Kennedy. I'll ask you to look at Courtright versus Madigan. I'll ask you to look at Ohio versus Turner, and the list goes on. You can't come up here and make a legal argument you can't cite to decisions made by courts, especially the Supreme Court of the United States. The first part of this bill is constitutional. You waive that right when you get on Facebook and you post images of children, pornography, and exploiting children. You've waived that right to privacy, and they ought to come after you, and they ought to find out where you are, and then they ought to bring that search warrant, and they ought to confiscate that computer, and they ought to go out and they ought to put you in jail after you've had a trial. But they should not be circumvented from securing the evidence that is needed to prosecute those crimes. I ask you to vote yes on Senate Bill 366.
Previous question has been ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 336 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that it is not in the rule book that case law must be cited on each bill that we speak on?
Repeat that question.
Is it not true that in the rule book it does not state that case law must be cited on the bills we speak on?
I haven't read that, but I'll go back when we're finished today and take a look at it.
Thank you.
I kind of drifted off when he was talking about case law. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of Senate Bill 336, the ayes are 113, the nays are 59. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 370.
Senate Bill 370 by Senator Wilkinson, the 50th, Huffstetler, the 52nd, Kirk, the 13th, Jackson, the 2nd, Mullis, the 53rd, and others. Be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4, Title 49 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia Annotated relating to medical assistance generally, so as to provide that the Commissioner of Human Services waives the first $25,000 of any estate. This bill will refer to the Committee on Health and Human Services. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Representative Hawkins to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill was brought to me by Senator Wilkinson, and it's an interesting bill. He had some of his constituents come to him and informed him that one lady, after her husband passed away in a nursing home, had, I think it was $28,000 in life savings. Another lady had, I think he said, $36,000. Well, our state right now, DCH, with the Estate Recovery Act, which is also called the clawback, Medicaid clawback, they do not go after anything below $25,000. Anything above, they go after that. So the lady that had the $34,000, they took the $34,000. Now this may not sound overly important, but guys, we don't live as long as our ladies, That's right. And 60% of all Americans will spend their life savings on health care. Right, Mr. Chairman? That's right. So that puts us in a nursing home, and we are there being covered by ABD Medicaid. So when we go toes up, our wife is left at home dealing with this estate problem. What this bill says is that Medicaid will not go after the first $25,000. And I ask you to vote for this bill. And if there are no questions, I will yield the well.
You have no questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 370 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Beasley Teague rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your inquiry.
Okay, will this work, the $25,000 for male or female, whichever? I need a little help. I'm sorry, I missed it. I'm sure he said something, but it sounded like guys, we don't live as long as the females, so we want to leave them the first 25. But if the female dies and want to leave some money to the husband,
I think what he said was
thank you.
that females, in his opinion, live longer than males.
Okay, but so this will apply for both, male or female?
It applies to both. It is an equal opportunity bill.
Thank you.
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 370, the ayes are 166. The nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Okay, listen up. Committee chairs, you might want to pay attention. House Resolution 1036 will be postponed to the next legislative day. House Resolution 1107 will be postponed to the next legislative day. Senate Bill 342 will be postponed to the next legislative day. Senate Bill 353 will be postponed to the next legislative day, and Senate Bill 355 will be postponed to the next legislative day. For what purpose does Representative Vernon Jones rise?
For a motion, Mr. Speaker.
State your motion.
A motion to suspend to have bills read for the first time and assigned to committees.
Representative Jones has moved that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended to allow a bill to be read for the first time and assigned to committee. Is there objection? He has 5 bills. Is there any objection to the clerk reading the caption to all 5 now and then the vote be on all 5? Hearing none, it is so ordered. The clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Jones, the 91st to be entitled an act to provide for a homestead exemption from a city of Stonecrest ad valorem taxes. Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Jones, the 91st to be entitled an act to provide for a homestead exemption for disabled and senior residents from city of Stonecrest ad valorem taxes. Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Jones, the 91st to be entitled an act to provide for a homestead exemption from city of Stonecrest ad valorem taxes for municipal purposes. Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Jones, the 91st, to be entitled an act to provide for a homestead exemption for City of Stonecrest ad valorem taxes for municipal purposes. Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Jones, the 91st, to be entitled an act to provide for a homestead exemption for unmarried surviving spouses of military veterans from City of Stonecrest ad valorem taxes.
On the gentleman's motion that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Each of the 5 bills are assigned to the Intergovernmental Coordination Committee. What purpose does Representative Caldwell rise?
To make a motion, Mr. Speaker.
State your motion.
I move that the rules be temporarily suspended so that a bill may be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
Representative Caldwell has moved that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee. Is there objection? Hearing none, the clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Bill by Representative Caldwell, the 111th, and others, to be entitled an act to amend an act to provide for a salary and expense allowance for the coroner of Henry County.
There being no objection to the gentleman's motion, it is so ordered. Intergovernmental coordination. Chair would ask you to join with me in wishing a happy birthday today to Representative Doreen Carter. Representative Carter. We're going on now to announcements. Going on to announcements, you may want to listen up to these. House will be in order. Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Insurance Committee, Chairman Smith, for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Insurance Committee will meet Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, room 606. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Peak for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Medical Cannabis Working Group will meet immediately after adjournment in the anteroom for a very, very quick meeting. Thank you. In that anteroom.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dempsey for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wednesday morning, 7:45 to 9:45. Members of RLG, alumni or current members, or Coverdale leadership are invited to breakfast at 2:30 in the state capitol.
Chair recognizes Chairman Jaspers for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, higher education will use that committee day tomorrow at 3 o'clock to hear a few bills. Hope you can be there. 506 at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hatchett for an announcement.
The Majority Caucus will meet tomorrow at high noon in room 403. Lunch will be served.
Chair recognizes Chairman Harden for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Special Rules Committee will meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. in room 415 CLOB.
Chair recognizes Representative Gilligan for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies of the House, you should have on your desk the notice about our caucus meeting, which will be on Wednesday, March 21st. We will be here in the Capitol in room 123. It will be our final meeting for the session. So Wednesday at adjournment or at lunch, whenever comes first. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the members of the Public Safety Committee, today afternoon meeting today is canceled, and we will meet tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in room 606. Please be there.
Chair recognizes Chairman Ballinger for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your juvenile justice meeting that was scheduled for this afternoon at 3 is canceled. That meeting will be rescheduled, and you will be sent a notice. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Barr for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Resource Management Subcommittee will meet at 3:45, room 403 of the Capitol. Resource Management. If we have a favorable report from that committee, Madam Chair asked me to announce that we will have a full committee tomorrow at 11 at 5:06. Full committee natural resources tomorrow, 11 o'clock, 5:06. And then we have been having a great time at our fellowship meetings Wednesday mornings at 7:15. We will have one on Wednesday, so just to remind y'all, come and join us 7:15 at our fellowship Wednesday morning. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Golick for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Judiciary Non-Civil will not meet this afternoon. However, Judiciary Non-Civil will meet tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. until noon, and then from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. if necessary. Also in room 406 of the LOB. Also at 3 p.m. tomorrow, the Property and Casualty Subcommittee of the House Insurance Committee will meet for a brief meeting at, again, 3 p.m. tomorrow, the room to be announced. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Maxwell for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regulated Industries Committee. We will meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock and 5:06, and we will not be there that long. Not as long as the non-civil judiciary, I can assure you. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Rakestraw for an announcement.
Colleagues, please join us tomorrow. We have a subcommittee meeting of the Film and Entertainment Committee of the Economic Development Committee for a screening of the movie Intervention. It's tomorrow from 11:30 to 1 at the Capitol, and there will be a discussion afterwards about, it's in room 341 of the Capitol, and there will be a discussion about the opioid epidemic in Georgia and what we can do. And we have an addiction crisis in our nation, and we really need to start looking at addressing the mental health and addiction issues so that we can start solving those problems and end our high suicide rates, our high homelessness. So I urge you to come, even if you're not on the committee, to see the screening of this movie, Intervention, and it was shot in North Atlanta, and it will be very eye-opening. So we hope to see you there tomorrow.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Health and Human Services will meet today at room change 506, not our usual place. 506, Health and Human Services, today at 4 o'clock. Thank you. We have an important bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Welch for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Public Safety Subcommittee on Appropriations will meet tomorrow at 3 o'clock in room CLOB 406, and we will be discussing Senate Bill 366, which is the Local Government and Sheriff's Compensation Bill.
That completes our announcements. The chair recognizes the Majority Leader of the House for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move this House stand in recess until 4 p.m. today and then stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, March 21st, 2018.
That's going to be a quick committee meeting, isn't it? Majority Leader has moved that this House be in recess until 4 o'clock p.m. today, at which time we would stand adjourned until Wednesday, March 21 at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. I think the ayes have it. This House will be in recess until 4 o'clock p.m., whereupon we will stand adjourned until Wednesday, March 21 at 10 a.m.